Hello and welcome to Neverwinter with Aragon. So returning to the Zen Market in the events section, you can see we have a bunch of this Feast of Lanterns stuff, but amongst it you shall see you'll be able to find the Storyteller Artifact Choice Packs are back. They're going to cost you 1,500 Zen on the base value there. They have 0 discount, so you can get a 20% off discount by invoking and opening your Celestial Bags of Refining. Now along with that we also have the Scarf of Embellishments and the Sash of Embellishments, and I do not recommend buying them whatsoever. They're going to cost you 1,000 Zen, and all they give you is a set like so. We can zoom in there and you can see that you'll gain an increase of attributes by 1. Okay, that's not bad. And then when you have a set of 3, your powers have a chance to deal additional unresistible damage equal to 10% of your weapon damage, which is next to nothing. Trust me, the new set from the campaign, Dragon Bone Veil, is a whole lot better than this set, which you're going to pay a lot of Zen for. Now, what I would recommend, or what I might recommend, is actually buying those artifacts to get yourself a set of the books. So let's say we were to use a different artifact set, then you can see that when you have these books, if you have 3 of the books, you can see they make a set there that adds 0.5% power and 5,000 maximum hit points per book you have. So if you have 3 books, that's 1.5% power along with 15,000 hit points. Now, what's more beneficial is when you have 3 of a set. So that's when you have 3 of these books. Then you will have the 3 of set, which gives you additional hit for weapon damage on a critical hit. Now, if you have a DPS build, your critical strike can get up to 90% chance. So you're nearly always critting on your hits, and then you will deal damage equal to your base damage here. This is your base damage. For me, it's 7,000. And you guys on DPS, that'll be up to 9,000. And you'll be dealing that much damage extra on a critical hit with having 3 of these Storyteller journals. And in addition, you gain the increased all attributes by 1, along with your powers having a chance to deal additional unresistible damage equal to 10% of your weapon damage. Now we can have an example look at, let's say, an endgame scenario in the new trial. You can see this is the Lost Mouth of Vengeance. This is the additional hit upon a critical hit. And you can see that it can hit there based up to 9,000 based on my base damage on my DPS, and that's hitting up to like 11,000 during an artifact call. However, the damage total of it is next to nothing. It's about 1% of my overall damage, you can see, and we dealt up to nearly 1 million damage per second on average during that 1 minute and 43 seconds. Now we can see the second proc is the Tales artifact set. Now between both of them you can see you had 81 hits here and you had 54 hits here. And this Tales artifact set, I was telling you, deals next to no damage. It's 10% of your base damage, which is only then 900 damage on a hit. It's minute. And so it leads to the question, are these books actually worth picking up? You're going to have to get 3 of the books. I recommend getting all 3 books or don't bother getting them. Alternatively, you could get 1 book and just run the Envenomed Storyteller Journal. Now what you will need to do is, you can see they have extra bonuses there. However, you need to get the tales for them. So you go to the Wondrous Bazaar, you go to Equipable, and here you can purchase all of your tales. Now their base cost is 200,000 Astral Diamonds per tale. So when you go to the Zen Market and you want to buy your books, you'll purchase this pack. Now this pack here will give you the option to choose one of those 4 books. What I would recommend is getting the Envenomed if you're going to get any. If you ideally want all 3, then in my opinion it's your choice between getting, firstly, the Envenomed would be a primary option, then the Frozen as secondary, and then your choice between Darkened or Flayed. I'd go with Darkened. It has a history of dealing a shit ton of damage, and they may very well screw that up again, and I guess you could make use of it if you had it lying around. Then you'd get all 3 books and you'd gear up your character as so. You'd have 3 of the books and then you'd have your artifact to fill your set. Now in a trial, this is not ideal. It's not going to be every time that you have all 3 books along with your set artifact, because some people will need to use alternate artifacts to buff the party's damage. So I'd have to switch to like Halish's Blast Scepter or Demogorgon's Reach to make sure that my party members are dealing more damage, and then I can't run with 3 books anyway, and then it's not worth it at all. So I'm here mainly to answer the question of whether it's worth it using all 3 books in all content, and I'm mainly going to show my results on all the classes from within the new trial and whether they're worth it or not. The alternative to getting all 3 books is to simply get the artifacts from the Battle Pass Echoes of Prophecy. Herein, on the first part, you will just have to complete this. You can get the Neverwinter Standard and you can get the Jewel of the North. And you can actually go and buy those off the auction house. You can see the standard here sells for a pretty decent price, and this gives you 1200 item level when maxed out, compared to these other artifacts only giving 600. When an artifact gives 1200, like the Mythallar Fragment artifact, you're already getting 12,000 hit points just from the item level. So that's more hit points than these Storyteller Journals are giving you, where they only give 11,000. 5,000 from the set plus 6,000 from their item level. So that's already been power creeps. So you would get the Mythallar Fragment, you would get the Neverwinter Standard, you would get the Jewel of the North, and you would get the Demogorgon's Reach. All 3 you can upgrade to 1200 item level. And in my opinion, nearly on all classes, that does beat the books in terms of the damage output you can gain. Unless you have this one piece, which is the Band of Air. The main reason is, when we have a look at the log, these procs from Lostmouth Vengeance, we got 81 of them, can proc the Touch of Wind. Meaning 81 hits. Basically, when the Touch of Wind has a chance to proc on 10% of the time, that is on average 8 more hits. Keep in mind though, the maximum amount of hits we can get in 1 minute and 43 seconds is only 103 hits, because we can only get 1 Touch of Wind hit per second. But it definitely increases your chances of this proccing, and you can see that deals the most amount of our damage. However, when you're doing random queues and things, you're generally getting put into content where you are scaled. And in that regard, item level means nothing, and then having artifacts which have higher item level than others doesn't make pretty much any difference, other than actually penalizing you through losing statistics. But again, let's go to the other classes and see what damage output we are actually getting from these Storyteller Journals, and whether it's going to be worth it for you to actually use them. And yes, this will correlate to scaled content as well, since it should be proportional. If our base damage goes down, then pretty much everything will go down. So let's have a look on the other classes. This here is on the Rogue. Lostmouth Vengeance, about 1% of our damage, and definitely will contribute to our Touch of Wind, but by a very small amount, maybe 2 or 3 more hits within that time period. And so we have a look at a Barbarian. You can see Lostmouth Vengeance there as well. We got a ton of hits. That Barbarian got massive amounts of hits, and this definitely contributes to the Touch of Wind, which was about 16% of the damage. Lostmouth Vengeance again, only about 1%. So many of you won't have this Touch of Wind, which is the Band of Air from Hardcore Voss, and thus getting these Storyteller Journals is not something I would worry about investing in. We go to the Bard. Unfortunately, I don't have a log with a Bard using the Storyteller Journals. In my opinion, it's not going to be worth it, mainly due to the fact, see the amount of damage Mystify does? That's 44% of its average damage. And if you were to throw in the Storyteller Journals, that'll be such a minute damage gain compared to Mystify. So I wouldn't recommend having them there. You're better off just increasing the amount of damage Mystify does, and thus just increasing your base damage. So then we move to the Cleric, and you can see the Cleric here also have the Lostmouth Vengeance. Very little hits though, because on average the Cleric doesn't hit a lot. They just use their encounter powers, their Forge Master, and also their Daunting Light. You can see them there, equal amount of hits, the amount of damage, and the Touch of Wind you can see is an absolute terrible amount of damage compared to those other classes of only like 4%. So there's no way you want to have the Storyteller Journals on a Cleric. Better off with just higher level artifacts. Then on a Fighter, again unfortunately I don't have a log with a Fighter using the Storyteller Journals, but they have very long cast times. They don't hit for very much at all, even less than the Cleric. You can see only about 362 hits within that period. All of this is from the phase 1 of the new trial. No Lost Mouth Vengeance here, so no 3 Storyteller Journals, but again, the amount of damage they get from Touch of Wind is quite a small amount. It's only 11%, that's okay, and having 3 Storyteller Journals might up this a tiny amount, but again, it's going to be so small that I wouldn't worry about it. Maybe 1% extra damage from using 3 Storyteller Journals, or it could even be just better to have 3 of the Heart of the Dragon for 10% cooldown reduction, or just having 3 of the 1200 item level artifacts. And then on a Ranger, you can see using the Lost Mouth Vengeance got a decent amount of hits, and Touch of Wind only about 11%. So again, pretty questionable whether you should run it on a Ranger. In my opinion, basically next to no difference in terms of damage. And then on a Rogue, of course, you can see we do benefit from this by being able to hit like 81 times there. And in my opinion, from my testings, it is very slightly better to run with the 3 Storyteller books, but you'll barely notice it if you remove those and just have higher item level. And second to last, we have a Warlock, again using the Storyteller Journals. Got a lot of hits. That's nearly twice as many hits as I get on my Rogue, so definitely worth it here to make sure you're proccing that Touch of Wind nearly all of the time. Definitely if you have a Warlock, try and pick up these books, but again, it's only for endgame and if you have this Touch of Wind. If you don't, I wouldn't worry about these books. And then on a Wizard, lastly, again, not so many hits, but I think on a Wizard, it's still going to be worth it to proc this Touch of Wind more often as well. Generally, with the fast hitting classes, you're better off getting these books, and you can go back and rewatch what I said for each of the classes there and which ones I do recommend getting them and which ones I feel the extra damage from them is just not going to be worth it. And again, if you do not have the Band of Air, then it is not worth getting these Storyteller Journals full stop. They're generally not going to give you much damage at all. So with that said, you can also go to the Terminal Trade Bar store. We have a discount right now which will allow us to buy companion and mount upgrade tokens on a 33% discount. They go from costing 3 per token down to just 2 per token. This is a massive boost, and if you're still working on upgrading insignias, I would recommend buying them now with the discount as well. The trade bars come from your lock boxes, about 40 or so on average. Now for the very last thing, I'd like to show you unbinding a Storyteller Journal and how it actually works with regards to those tails. So let's say we unequip our Envenom Storyteller Journal. Here we can right click on it and we can remove all item bindings. So it's going to cost us 50 of those unbind tokens. So here we have our Storyteller Journal. Now we can go and equip it, and we have all of the tails and so on. You can see it prompted us saying that you wouldn't be able to transfer it between characters. It would basically get bound. You can see, there we go. But once we have equipped it, it still remains unbound. So don't worry about that. We can still go jump over to our bank and transfer it to a different character. However, when you do this, you can see when you actually claim the book on, let's say, this bard, I've never ran Tales of Old here, we can see the book doesn't have the tails anymore. We can go and even equip the book. Again, it gives us a prompt that it's going to be untradeable, but it still remains unbound. Hovering over it, you can see it has no tails. So if you were to go and do this, you need to buy the tails on every single character which you want to actually make use of the books. Again, the tails are in the equipable section of the Wondrous Bazaar. Now you can see pretty much which tails you should get. These first 5 are to do with the Frozen. The next 5 here are to do with your Darkened one, and the next 5 here are to do with your Envenomed Storyteller Journal, and the last one is to do with Flayed Storyteller Journal. So make sure you're buying the right ones, and the way to see it is to hover over the tooltip again, and you can read which tail you actually need. We need a tail of Poison, of Awe, of Madness, of Power, and Demise to fully kit out our Envenomed Storyteller Journal. And if you just want to have an Envenomed Storyteller as your primary artifact, it gives you lots of action points, gives you a self buff of damage, I would just take the last 2 tails. However, the Tail of Madness is good, the Tail of Awe is good, along with the Tail of Poison, because they all have their unique benefits there. And again, once you buy those tails, we can see them here. We'll just buy the tails for the Envenomed. Those tails will go in your inventory, and then once they're there, you can open your inventory and you double click on the tails and they get activated in our artifact. As you can see, now we have the Tail of Awe, and we can find find the rest of our tails here, activating each of those, and now we have an Envenom Storyteller filled with tails. However, we can go and unequip it, and we can go and put it in our bank, and we can see while we have the tails on this character, we can go and transfer the envenomed, and since we have the tails on my rogue, if they don't transfer with the artifact, we can still have the tails, even though we had it basically moved. We moved it between our characters. So if you want to have the tails on each of your characters and move your storyteller journals just by unbinding them, that's doable. You just need to make sure to pick up the tails. So overall, hopefully this was somewhat insightful to you guys as whether or not you should go and pick up those story channel journals now. Just a quick summary: if you don't have the Touch of Wind from Hardcore Voss, don't pick up the books. If you do, well, on a barbarian you should have them. On a bard, I wouldn't worry about it. On a cleric, I wouldn't worry about it. On a fighter, I wouldn't worry about it. On a ranger, I wouldn't worry about it. On a rogue, I would get them. On a warlock, I would get them. And on a wizard, I would get them. Those 3 classes. So again, hopefully I presented this well. If I did, consider leaving the video a like. If you're new around here, consider subscribing. We'll see you guys around. Goodbye for now.